Welcome back to Political Paradigms. You are with me, Toby, and Sunny again this week. As of about 10 minutes ago, Theo was going to be joining us. Sunny, what's happened?
He has been called away on urgent business from the sounds of it, so we're going to have to do our best to fill in.
Does urgent business involve alcohol? I feel like it probably does.
I'm not in a position to judge, and I'm not in a position to comment because, we will obviously forgive whatever decision he's made and support him fully in his career of whatever he's trying to do.
Exactly. I can't blame him. I've got a cracking hangover today, but let's get on with it. Let's get on with the pod. An interesting week in politics this week. Maybe not quite as hectic as last week. In some ways, again, very, very full. I thought we'd start at the top of the agenda with a little ode to events abroad. Obviously, there is a emerging, escalating situation in the Red Sea with the Houthi rebels and sort of the disruption of global shipping, and the UK and the US sort of doing joint strikes. A lot of debate about whether the strikes are any use and whether it's just sort of pointless escalation or whether it's necessary retaliation. Obviously, we're not a foreign policy pod here. But the angle I wanted to take, of course, because that's what this pod is about, is an electoral angle. Because some economists, I think most economists I've seen don't think this. I've seen some that do. Basically saying there is a sort of the degree of disruption to global shipping now and the potential increased disruption to global shipping, without going into sort of scenarios like full war with Iran, which would be economically catastrophic but are pretty on the margins, pretty unlikely. But just escalation, further disruption could in the months to come push up inflation here in the UK in a big way and over in the US in a big way. Now, obviously, that would shatter two things. It would shatter sort of Rishi Sunak and Joe Biden's things they're clinging on to, which is basically, look, the economy's improving. But it would also, if you're looking at a war, maybe a ground war with sort of British and American troops, there's obviously the possibility of sort of a rallying around the flag or some sort of boost for incumbents. I have my own take on this, which I'll delve into in a minute. But Sonny, in the scenario where the UK and the US get more involved in overseas conflict and we have sort of the economy worsening or inflation worsening as a result, which of those two things win out? Does it hurt Sunak and Biden? Does it help Sunak and Biden? Is it a wash? How do you think this would play out?
I personally believe it will hurt Sunak and Biden. More Sunak than Biden. I think the UK population is very, very uninterested in conflict. I think it's been quite uninterested for a while, especially if it affects the kind of economic standing of the UK and the UK economy. I would say overall I would say it hurts the UK the most, but I remember hearing that the US population are quite overall pro Israel and quite pro-Israeli, which might then actually help Biden in this scenario, in which it looks like he's not just kind of sending Israel money or just, saying that we support Israel. He's taking a forward stance in it. So I think it's negative for the UK and maybe not so much for the US, though I would not be surprised if it's still negative for the US.
I think the US angle would be like two things. So Joe Biden's really unpopular and he's relying on like the economy being good and continuing to be good to sort of save him. If that goes down the tubes, obviously, I think it probably means the election is sort of advantaged Trump. But I think the other thing is it sort of allows Trump to portray himself as, I'm going to project stability and it's Biden's fault all this stuff is happening. Although I did see some interesting polling over this weekend that basically said voters think under Trump, the Ukraine war wouldn't have happened, so they're blaming Biden, but they don't blame Biden for the war in Gaza and sort of the Middle East situation. So that might imply exactly what you're saying, which is voters don't necessarily blame Biden for that happening.
Yes. Well, I guess that kind of follows along from what I was saying, yeah.
It sort of, confirms your theory.
Thank you.
My thinking on this is, if you think back to sort of the era where we used to rule the world in the words of Coldplay, where the UK and the US, obviously the US, and the West were ascendant in the 90s. And you could have interventions overseas, like the Gulf War, that really boosted incumbent governments. You know, John Major and George Bush had a massive PR shine as a result of the Gulf War intervention against Saddam Hussein. But these wars, they look good on TV. They did not impact domestic supply chains, inflation, the domestic economy. I think in an era where global conflict affects the domestic economy in a major way, obviously there are caveats to this. You know, if voters see Sunak defending Britain against some kind of threat, obviously that helps Sunak, for example. But if it's an abstract conflict that we've muddied our way into, and it's sort of really disastrous, and it worsens the economy, all these things, I think what politicians aren't reckoning with in the 2020s is these conflicts actually hurt us at home. And I think that means you don't get a rally around the flag if you're hurting the domestic economy. People go, stop hurting the domestic economy, prioritise us at home. And I think there is I don't know if you'd agree, Sonny, I think there is a much more isolationist streak in both the UK and the US electorates than there has been in the past.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with that. I think I think a lot of Europe, a lot of and the US, I would say, including and I guess that North America is probably of that opinion in which they'd rather protect themselves. But I think we see that in the same way a lot of Europeans go, geez, like look at what's happening in Ukraine and Russia. That's closest thing to on our doorstep as we've had since the Second World War. You know, it feels closer than ever, and they probably, as you said, have this kind of isolationist belief.
Yeah, and I guess the Ukraine is a case in point, because, you know, that is very near to home and people feel a lot of sympathy, but it didn't stop sort of the economic impact from hurting the government. Although, again, with our own troops on the ground, who knows? But yeah, very interesting stuff, and I'm sure we'll circle back to it. We don't know what the situation will be in the weeks and months to come. It could be better, it could be worse, and it's just another variable to throw into sort of the massive mesh of uncertainty that is the 2024 global environment and electoral environment.
Yes.
On to British politics. So, Rishi Sunak and Rwanda are back on the agenda. As we know, before Christmas, there was a lot of trouble. It looked like the bill could fail. It didn't. Now we're hearing the same talk. You know, the bill's coming back to Parliament. The right that said they only voted for it because they could do this later are saying they're going to put down amendments. You know, lots of talk of red lines. One Nation Tory group is saying that I don't think are particularly One Nation, but that's what they call themselves. They're saying we won't, you know, we'll vote for Rwanda, but no further. And if you add any more, we'll vote it down. And we're even bigger than the right wingers. The only MP who said they'd vote against the government so far on amendments is Suella Braverman. Some talk over the weekend about Lee Anderson as well. Obviously, it's talk of size. Do they have enough to abstain, or they need less if it's genuinely voting against? But obviously, it basically looks like if an amendment is accepted, it could kill the bill. If the bill fails, it's obviously a big slap in the face for Rishi Sunak. It raises questions about sort of grip on Parliament. Sonny, do you think they can square this circle, or are we staring down a potential parliamentary defeat? That was very much hyped up before Christmas, but it feels like it's simmered down a bit now.
Well, that's a very good point. Mm. I think what's interesting is, and annoyingly, hopefully you can tell me what stage the bill is at right now, but I believe it's at its second reading.
I believe so. It had its sort of initial run through Parliament.
If it's had its announcement, then that's the first bill, and generally most bills pass the first reading.
I think
it's not really.
Yeah, it's a formality, right?
Yes, yeah.
As far as I understand it, because it had a debate and a vote, I think that means it's had its second reading, right? That's the very beginning.
Yes, no, you're right. You're right. Actually, sorry. This is so bad of us. We're not completely up to speed. Okay, so I think that this bill, I think it's quite difficult to call, to be honest, because I think that the Conservative Party is becoming more and more split. And I think the Labour Party could really throw in a massive spanner in the works. Because I think I could see where the Labour Party goes on this. could definitely affect where the kind of more centre left of the Conservatives also go on this. Um, but I would say, I think going by kind of the standard, I think it will pass. I don't think it's going to be the standard safety a government bill gets. I think it might be quite tight. But also, interestingly, there's a significant chance that it might not even be passed by the time the general election happens if the House of Lords um, try and slow the bill down, because the House of Lords are able to stop it by one reading, so it has to go back, and that will take months. Um, so, so yeah, I think it will probably pass, but it's not going to be a simple pass.
Yeah, and I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, actually, this is playing in the government's hands. They want it to fail." And I was like, "Do they though? Because like this is sort of supposedly the Prime Minister's flagship policy, and it would just make them look really feckless and useless if they can't get it through the Commons." The other thing I've seen recently is, and I've been saying this for a while, a lot of people have, there are questions about, obviously concern about immigration is very real. There was some data out today. 9 out of 10 constituencies in the country think immigration is too high. That cuts across, Labour voters, Lib Dem voters, Tory voters. It's sort of a universal feeling. However, at the same time, the government has spent a year raising the salience of the issue, pushing it up the agenda. It's now an issue that Conservative voters feel more strongly about than ever. Reform UK have hit 10% in the polls as a result. So they're getting the benefit of the Conservatives' political strategy. Now, what I saw in Bloomberg this weekend is basically Sunak wants to get this bill through and then stop talking about immigration, U-turn on that, and just talk about the economy. Now, I don't know how much that works, but it seems more sensible to me than sort of continually talking about an issue that 85% of the country think you've mishandled. What do you think, Sonny?
I could believe that, to be honest. It just seems like such a bizarre system and way of trying to make the people believe that they're doing a good job. I would say I can see that, but I don't know how much time Sunak's going to have if once if this bill is passed. How much time he's going to have to really talk about anything else, because he might not have that long, especially if, because I know we all think that now it's going to be November, the election. Some people I've talked to are still saying they think it's going to be close to October. Some are still saying May, less now May. Probably, I still think it's probably going to be in October time. So I don't know how much time he's going to have to really talk about anything else. Uh,
And
might just be one speech about, oh, we done quite well with the economy, I think. But no, yeah, it'd be weird. It'd be weird strategy, though. I wouldn't put it past them.
it is, I think it is that thing where, like, the story of the Sunak premiership so far has been, we really want this headline, but we're going to get that headline. They have no grip of the news
Yeah.
agenda at all. Whereas Boris Johnson, I think, in some ways, was quite good at manipulating the news agenda. Sunak does not seem to have those talents. Although there have been some pretty big attacks. They're stepping up in the last week. Sort of attacks on Keir Starmer, trying to associate his prosecutorial record with sort of the post office scandal, trying to associate him with sort of letting criminals out of prison and sort of when he was an attorney or a lawyer, getting people off death row in different countries, defending murderers and stuff like that. Do you think that has any purchase, or is it just noise? Because there have been a lot this week. They've sort of stepped up, and Conservative Central Office are promising a sort of a dossier of sort of dodgy Keir Starmer legal cases, stuff he did that's bad.
Yeah, I think it's strange. I think it's funny that they're trying to frame a man like a lawyer. It's like they've never heard of what a lawyer
Yeah.
does in their life. Like it's a bit strange, but it'll probably resonate with a few people. Probably not so much with others. I just think whatever the Conservatives do now is, yeah, they're throwing everything they have. And this is a very weak point, I think, in my opinion. It might land, it might actually do something. And if it does, I think respect to them for somehow pulling that off. Uh, but most likely, I think it won't do much.
Yeah, I mean, like we always say, if they pull this election off, it'll be sort of the greatest comeback in like political history. You know,
Yeah,
hats off to them. But it's probably.
yeah,
Do you think Rishi Sunak has got it in him to sort of do the greatest political hula hoop jump in modern history? Probably not.
yeah. No.
I think it's just noise. I think if the Tories were more popular, the attacks would have more purchase. Just don't think they have enough credibility at the moment. But people have doubts about Keir Starmer. They just have greater doubts about the current Prime Minister. Looking at the polling in the last few weeks, there was some looking at a bit of narrowing before Christmas. It does look, after a couple of weeks of sort of the polling cycle, the polls that are normally good for Labour have got even better. The polls that are normally worse for Labour have got more Labour. So it looks like the Labour lead is back, sort of heading towards 20 points. Conservative vote share is about as low as it has ever been going into an election year. Labour vote share is not as high as it's ever been, but it is high. It's mid-40s. And I just think remarkable stability. The Labour lead has fluctuated between about 15 and 21 points since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. And I just don't see how that's going to move. You know, none of the approval metrics are moving. None of the performance metrics are moving. Labour's lead on the economy is arguably growing at the moment. It's just a deep, deep, deep hole, and I don't quite see what they do from here. I mean, don't know about you, Sonny, but I feel like in some ways they'd probably be better off stopping worrying about politics and just governing and seeing if that works.
I don't think they could govern much, to be honest.
Well, no, they've not really got an internally coherent parliamentary party at the moment, do they?
Oh yeah, I want that, and I don't know what they can kind of get done in what is kind of just such a short period of time.
Are they on political death row at the moment? Is that kind of what this is? They're just kind of waiting, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah. I think he seemed to be on political death row, but the person in question is very positive, at least externally. Maybe not so much internally, because Sunak, I don't know what he is on, but he seems to be thinking that they're going to, not even a miracle's going to be needed. I'm like, politely, mate, you're going to need a lot to do anything close to, putting off this. So yeah, I'm very confused to what their stance is on the whole situation, but I think this is probably the closest thing to political death row we've had in a little while.
Yeah. I mean, I think we almost think it's so weird that they're so positive. I think in some ways they were a bit like this in 97, because I was looking at some newspapers from before the 97 election, and it's saying stuff like the great unknown factor. Don't knows might come back to the Tories and they'll still win. And like John Major was like, don't worry, polls don't matter, we'll win. Da, 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 da. And it was just, I think this is what they do. You know, it's never over till it's over, and they're not. I feel like Rishi Sunak probably couldn't get up in the morning if he sort of sat there and went, yes, I'm going to lose in a landslide. You've kind of got to put your own personal positive spin. You know, it could turn around.
Yeah. No, I get that. They confuse me.
Yeah. There you go. Final UK story of the week before we get on to a very busy agenda of American politics. The Labour Party... sorry, no, not the Labour Party. The Liberal Democrats, same thing, are in a lot of some difficulty this week. Ed Davey, their leader, who most of the public probably hadn't heard of, is under a bit of fire. Obviously, this week at Westminster has been dominated by the post office scandal, which was sort of an appalling miscarriage of justice that saw a lot of sub-postmasters going to prison, having their lives ruined because of the failings of a system and a sort of institutional cover-up, or something resembling an institutional cover-up. We won't be able to do this story justice, and it's not really our place on sort of an electoral politics podcast. It's been a huge emotive story. I think everyone in this country who's heard about it feels very strongly about it. And it is a non-political story. There have been ministers overseeing the post office of a Conservative hue, of a Labour hue, of a Liberal Democrat hue, because of the coalition. And you can name individuals from all parties that have contributed to this, right back to the Labour government. But Ed Davey is the only prominent political figure in 2024 that was involved in this, that was overseeing the post office, and that is on the record sort of dismissing these concerns. At the time, he obviously says he regrets it. He says he was lied to. He was being asked about this, sort of refusing to apologise. Sir Ed Davey, the Lib Dem leader, this week, I think this was an interview on Friday. I'm going to play a little clip of this here.
Why not draw a line under it then and just apologise? Can you apologise to said postmasters?
Of course, I regret.
That's not an apology.
Well, I've said of course. I think it really is.
Well, why don't you say I am sorry?
Well, I've said time and time again that I deeply regret
That's not
that
I
I
am
was
sorry.
that I was lied to.
That's not an apology.
I was lied
That's
to on an industrial scale, and of course, I'm sure every other post office minister who was lied to regrets that they were part of this huge conspiracy that the post office perpetrated.
Why can't you say sorry?
Well, of course, I feel that I'm right to express regret for not getting to the
Why can't you
bottom.
say sorry? It's the least they deserve. Look what they've been through. Just say sorry for your part in not having
Well,
got to the answers.
my heart goes out to the hundreds of people.
And it goes on for about 2 minutes. Sonny, your thoughts?
I just think that's absolute political waffle. I'm perfectly honest. Just that is just it means nothing. He said nothing. My heart goes out to you. Oh, what is that like compensation then? Oh, don't worry, guys. My life's been ruined. Ed Davies' heart goes out to me. Like, slightly go away. I would think at least in that situation. It's just politics for you, to be honest. I know this is a politics podcast, but it's just. I mean, every politician would probably do it. You know, Keir Starmer would have probably said something very similar. Rishi Sunak would have said something very similar. Ed Davies no better or worse than anyone else. He's just the same, I think. So,
I think
yeah.
that's a good way of looking at it, and I think it would obviously be wrong to say, you know, it's all Ed Davies' fault. Why isn't he resigning?
Yeah.
But I just think from the strategic position, maybe this won't hurt the Liberal Democrats because it's not about the leader, but maybe it will. And Ed Davies' strength has been no one thinks about Ed Davey. He doesn't put anyone off, but he also doesn't bring anyone in. So if he's starting to put people off, or may put people off, surely the Liberal Democrats would be better off replacing him. You know, if he's a net negative, instead of being net neutral, get rid. And I don't know if that will happen, but it just feels like, I mean, the Lib Dems were really hurt in 2017. It really helped the Lib Dem vote consolidate behind sort of Corbyn's Labour in 2017 because Tim Farron was going around the country being constantly asked about his views on gay sex, bluntly. That was the question he kept being asked, and he kept answering it in a really awkward, contrived way. And, you know, he resigned after the election, and it definitely dragged down the party brand. I just think, is this going to be an election where Ed Davey, everywhere he goes, is asked, what do you say about the postmasters? And it just sticks to him, unfairly or otherwise. I mean, do you think this is the new Tim Farron?
Yeah, I think it could be. I think obviously it will change depending what paper is asking them, as in depending on where that paper stands politically, they'll probably be nicer or worse to him. But no, I could definitely see it being a long-term problem for Ed Davey.
All right, let's have a look at American politics. Of course, we've got the Iowa caucuses. A lot going on. We'll take a look at a bit of the campaigning. You know, in terms of the Biden camp, there's not been a huge amount of news this week. There have been some interesting polls. There was a really, really bad poll for Biden in Michigan. But then there was a pretty good poll for Biden in Pennsylvania. It's kind of a wash. The polling right now indicates, you know, Trump slightly ahead, Biden narrowly behind in the Electoral College, but it's too close to call, and we're like 8 months, 10 months, 11 months out. So basically, the race is still, you know, broadly a toss-up. You know, if you think Biden was favoured, you still do. I think he still probably on balance is. Looking at Trump, he did a town hall over the weekend on Fox News. I'm going to see if there's any highlights I can pick up here. He talked about a lot of things. I think the most interesting thing he talked about is he talked about abortion, and he sort of moderated his answers. He was being, a lot of the Republicans right now are campaigning on, ban abortion, ban abortion. He basically said, yes, I'm proud that I was responsible for Roe v. Wade being overturned, but we have to win elections, and I'm not going to support, a 6-week abortion ban nationwide. And he's sort of trying to position himself as sort of a moderate on the issue. He also said...
It's quite impressive, if anything, to be honest.
Yeah, and sort of no one else in the primary would have the deft to sort of pull that off, because, you're upsetting your primary voters. But he knows he's so popular, he can get away with doing that.
Yeah.
Would you like to hear the Roe v. Wade answer, or would you like to hear him promising he won't be a dictator?
Both, preferably, but it's up to you. Up to you.
Okay, we'll go with dictator, and then we'll see if we've got time for Roe v. Wade. Here we go.
In recent days, you seem to issue a warning that if in the courts, and even the U.S. Supreme Court, if they didn't treat you fairly, that maybe there would be bedlam in the country. Use that word, bedlam in the country. And in the last 2 days, at the same time, in the last 2 speeches, President Biden is focusing his campaign on the threat to democracy and political violence. Take a listen.
I'll say what Donald Trump won't. Political violence is never, ever acceptable in the United States political system. Never, never, never.
All right, so to Robert's question, this is clearly a focus of the Biden campaign. So can you say tonight that political violence is never acceptable?
Well, of course that's right. And of course, I'm the one that had very little of it. Take a look at wars. Again, I didn't start. I wasn't involved in wars. We beat the hell out of ISIS. We won 100%. We brought our troops back home. Look at the violence that we've had. Look at the violence we have recently.
Right, but when you say bedlam, what do you mean?
I think you have bedlam. I think you look at Joe Biden, it's bedlam. You have a man who can't...
So he's kind of obviously flipping it around on Biden and the Democrats. That's what he tends to do. Have a listen to him talking about abortion here.
Lives. And I said, thank you very much. I knew exactly what he meant. 2 million lives. And nobody's done...
He's talking about the sort of unborn children he's saying he saved.
More in that regard than me. Now, I happen to be for the exceptions, like Ronald Reagan, with the life of the mother, rape, incest. I just have to be there. I think probably 78% or so, Paul, about 78%. It was Ronald Reagan. He was for it. I was for it. But I will say this. You have to win elections. Otherwise, you're going to be back where you were. And you can't let that ever happen again. You've got to win elections. If you look at it, Ron DeSantis, I don't know what he really believes, because, you never know with a politician, and he's just another politician as far as I'm concerned. But his poll numbers have gone down to a level that he's going to be out of the race very soon. He's going to be out very soon. I watched him last night. He's standing up with his shoes, his fancy shoes.
And on it goes. But basically saying explicitly, when he's going into Iowa, which is full of evangelical voters who are still set to vote for him, he's saying, I am the moderate Republican on abortion. First of all, Sonny, do you buy it? Second of all, how do you think he's is this a man that can take on Joe Biden? Is this someone that is sort of fighting fit and able to moderate for the general election?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's a showman at heart, which makes him very scary. The standard political people and the standard political understanding of what politicians and what government will do. I think he will say most things to get to become president before. I mean, remember, he was a Democrat for a number of years. Now he's the face of the Republican Party, basically. So yeah, I think he can moderate himself. When he's president, if he becomes president, that's a completely different story. Then we'll probably see what he actually believes on things about abortion. But in the election race, I think he could hold his tongue a little bit. I think he probably will, if him and the people around him think that's going to help his votes. Because also, remember, it's not definite he's going to win this election. I think it's going to be very tight. I think it could be just as, if not tied to, then the previous election. So nothing's decided, in my opinion. I think everything is to play for.
That's how I feel about it. I think this is one of the hardest presidential elections to predict. Not in terms of the nominees. They're, 95%. The two nominees will be Trump and Biden. But beyond that, it's completely up for grabs, right? This could really turn bad for Biden, and Trump has a really solid win. Trump could, get convicted of a load of crimes. The economy could be great. Biden could have something approaching a landslide, or more likely, it's a nail biter. But it could go any number of ways. We just don't know where this is going to go. Two unpopular candidates, really volatile electorate looking for alternatives, third parties in the mix as well. It's all over the place. And I do think the winning Trump strategy is he shuts up, he moderates, and he just lets Biden be the face of sort of the campaign. If Trump is out, and this is his big weakness, it's what he keeps doing, everything I see from Trump, he is, as much as he's attacking Joe Biden, he's just complaining. They're coming after me. They're attacking me in court. They're coming after me. It's so unfair. And he's just whining. And I think whining plus saying the last election was rigged is a losing strategy. Whereas I'm moderate on abortion, I won't cut entitlements, and I'm not going to say anything, is probably a winning strategy. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of Republicans might be more interested in what Trump has to say rather than sometimes the facts. That might be a bit of a controversial opinion.
I think it's safe to say he's created his own sort of echo chamber in the party, hasn't he, in many ways?
Yeah, I would say so. I think in the country he has. Very successfully too, I have to say. But no, I think what you've said is probably closer to winning strategy rather than what he's going with before.
Yeah. And there was some polling out, right, over this weekend. Nationally, he's at nearly 70% in the primary.
Yes.
In the general, Haley does really well against Biden. Clear margin, nearly 10 points. DeSantis, decent win, 4 or 5 points. Trump, it's 2-point spread. It's a narrow Trump advantage that could obviously tip either way. When you see a 2-point advantage, that's not solid. So he does look to be absolutely dominant in the primary and the weakest option for Republicans to go against Biden, which seems, that makes sense to me. That doesn't surprise me. Now, looking at the debate, there's been a debate in the primary. DeSantis and Haley, as we said last week, it's all about who will come second to Trump. Will they come anywhere near Trump? Sort of final polling indicates, Trump hovering around 50%, which would be a record for an Iowa caucus. And Haley and DeSantis are kind of neck and neck. And I think if Haley clearly wins against DeSantis, then DeSantis is just toast. Because this is meant to be a good state for him. He's crumbled nationally. Just a complete collapse. If DeSantis comes in second, he muddles along, but he's in single digits in New Hampshire, so it doesn't really matter. So in a way, if you want this to become Trump-Haley, you're cheering on Haley sort of edging out DeSantis. But 99% Trump is going to win clearly in Iowa. And the race for second place is more interesting. DeSantis and Haley have had a little debate. I'm going to play a bit of this, Sonny, and then I'm going to go to you for your thoughts on the race for second place.
The number of people that will be amnestied when I'm president is 0. We cannot do an amnesty in this country. First of all, it's going to do is cause more people to want to come illegally. So you got to enforce the law. It's got to be consistent. People got to know it's there. You also have to remove benefits for people who are here illegally. We should not let states provide these benefits. In Florida, obviously, we don't do that. We don't allow the driver's license and all that. But some states do, and it creates a magnet for people coming in.
You do not have to choose when it comes to national security. This is about keeping Americans safe. This is about preventing war. This is about keeping our military men and women from having to fight a war. And you only do that when you focus on national security, not telling lies to the American people that they have to choose. That is wrong. That's never been the case.
So this is the UN way of thinking, that we're somehow globalists and we have unlimited resources to do. I think here's the problem. You can take the ambassador out of the United Nations, but you can't take the United Nations out of the ambassador.
When you look at Donald Trump, I have said, I think he was the right president at the right time. I agree with a lot of his policies, but his way is not my way. I don't have vengeance. I don't have vendettas. I don't take things personally. For me, it's very much about no drama, no whining, and getting results and getting them done. So I don't think that President Trump is the right president to go forward. I think it's time for a new generational leader that's going to go and make America proud again. That's what I'm going to try and do.
Okay, so basically the polling indicates DeSantis won with Republican voters. The reason for that is I think Haley is making arguments that appeal to the general electorate in some ways. DeSantis is targeted on the primary. And I think no matter how good a performer Nikki Haley is, and that's debatable, I just think DeSantis, A, didn't come across as awful as he always normally has done, so awkward and all the rest. But also, he's talking to the base. And Nikki Haley is defending some positions that are just fundamentally unpopular with the Republican base. Sonny, what do you think about the race for second place in Iowa and beyond?
I think DeSantis might get. It's going to be tight, whatever it is, and I don't know. What it will do for each other because, oh god, I don't even. Has Trump decided his running mate yet, or is that?
That will come once he's the presumptive nominee. If he,
Right,
obviously,
okay.
it is a when, really, isn't it? But
Yeah, I would say it's pretty much decided that he will be the Republican candidate. Yeah, I think the thing is, I think it's difficult for either of them. I think because they're in such a massive shadow, which is, Donald Trump, former president of the United States of America, very popular in certain areas, very unpopular in certain areas. Going against Biden, who has not massively done anything terrible, been quite popular in certain areas, hasn't really put a foot wrong. In the last 4 years, the USA hasn't been any storming of the capitals. There hasn't been any massive headlines. There hasn't been a great divide through the nation. There hasn't been a global disease going around the world, destroying economies. So I don't know if it matters too much who comes second, who comes third. I think they're both probably going to be quite damaged by this in some ways, and maybe benefit in certain areas. But I mean, the US is still very divided. I just think the Democrats have just done slightly better in the last 4 years.
here's my theory. I think that and it doesn't really depend on Iowa because this might happen either way. I think Nikki Haley is positioning herself, and this isn't original. This is I've seen other people saying this, so this isn't sort of my original thought. She's positioning herself to be the "I told you so" candidate. Trump gets nominated. Trump loses to Biden. You should have gone with me. And I think DeSantis has he started this race polling at 40%. He's now in the single digits in some polls. I think he's just witnessed such a political collapse, whereas Nikki Haley started at, 3%. She's in the 20s in some polls. And I just think it's a case of, for Nikki Haley, she will be a big player in 2028. Whether or not she can actually win the nomination, she'll be a player. Whereas DeSantis, I think this is the end of his national career. And I think, I saw, who said this? Ettinger Mentum, great account on Twitter, basically said this earlier, and this might be true. The 2028 political situation in America may well be incumbent President Kamala Harris being challenged by Nikki Haley. That may be where we're all heading. Because is Biden going to serve another full term? Probably not. And is Trump, Trump might be in prison by this point. God knows what else. Could he be dead? He could be. He's not in great shape. So I just think, she's probably setting herself up better for 2028 than anyone else. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Because it's interesting when you hear the clip we just heard from Haley. He's not going against Trump. she mentioned that she thought he was the best president for that period. I think she's probably trying to put herself as the continuation of Trump in a new generation. I mean, Nikki Haley is she's no, I mean she's nowhere near as old as she's 51. Trump is in his 70s. There is, a 20-year age gap.
It's a breath of fresh air in many ways, right?
Yeah, I would say so. It's a bit funny to think that in the next 4 years' time she'll be 55. So 55 is a breath of fresh air. But when you've had a president who was nearly 80, and then potentially another president who is or nearly is 80, 55 seems like a spring chicken. So no, I could see her as kind of being the next Trump if that fan base, if that group of people is still just as popular as they were before.
I do think as well. I mean, there's some polling here. Have you heard of the sort of Ann Seltzer poll in Iowa? Basically, it's a poll by this lady called Ann Seltzer, and every Iowa caucus or every Iowa election, people go, "This poll is wrong. This poll is wrong," and it's always right. She predicted the sort of Obama win against Clinton in 2008. She predicted Bernie Sanders doing well when everyone said he wouldn't. She predicted Joe Biden doing badly in Iowa in 2020. She predicted, when a lot of polls showed Biden and Trump tied in Iowa in 2020, she predicted a solid Trump win in Iowa. She gets it right every time. So I'm going to read you the Des Moines Register Ann Seltzer poll, final pre-caucus poll released today. All right? Trump is at 48%. Haley is at 20%.
Oh, wow.
DeSantis is at 16%, and Vivek Ramaswamy is at 8%. Now, few facts here from this poll. Trump's share of the vote breaks George W. Bush's record in 2008 of 43% for the highest support level in any pre-Iowa caucus Republican poll. His lead of 28 points also breaks Bush's record of 23. So this would be a historic win in an Iowa caucus. There are issues for Haley. So among Republican voters, her unfavorability rating is now up to 46%, up from 31% in about a month. And her favorability rating has gone from 59% to 48%. So what I think this shows is Nikki Haley is consolidating non-Trump voters. Because in Iowa, as a Democrat or an independent, you can register as a Republican on the day to get involved in the caucuses. And among Haley voters, this is incredible because you wouldn't get this with DeSantis voters. Haley backers in Iowa said, again, if it was Trump-Biden, they'd vote Biden by 20 points. So the Haley voters are people that would vote Biden over Trump. Half of them are independents or Democrats, and 77% of them dislike Trump. So she's not doing well. This sort of shows how Nikki Haley can be the second place candidate, but she can't beat Trump, if you get what I mean. Because most Republicans like Trump. I guess the problem for DeSantis is his people like Trump, so they're just going for the main guy. Whereas Haley, she's got her people, and they like her, and I'm sure you saw Chris Christie dropping out of the race. We'll talk more about that next week because of New Hampshire. That could really give Nikki Haley a leg up in sort of the most anti-Trump Republican primary state. Might be the only place she could win or come close. Now, the other problem is Nikki Haley's supporters are the least enthusiastic. Trump and DeSantis's are the most, and we're looking at sort of we're looking like snowstorm, really dire weather for caucus day tomorrow, Monday. So, do you think I think there might be a possibility that Haley does worse than it looks, because these Democrats, they might prefer her, but they might not be motivated to sort of run over broken glass or ice, whereas Trump people will be. Do you want to pause the pod here, or do you have numbers already? Should we do a prediction for how we think these people are going to do in Iowa?
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to.
Okay. Do you have a prediction here, or do you want me to pause the pod and we'll do a bit like we did before New Year's, do a little prediction?
We're going to have to pause the pod.
Let's do it. All right, pause the pod. We'll do a little prediction. We'll be back in moments. All right, we've crunched some numbers. We've looked at the average. We've decided, who we think will do worse than the average or the same or better. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
that's similar, isn't it? Oh,
Yeah, but you have Haley coming third.
I do. Now, my rationale for this is I think her voters aren't
the
going to
weather.
bother. Yeah. I think if the weather was nice, DeSantis would be in third. I hope Haley's in second, just because I kind of want the DeSantis campaign out of its misery. Because it's just depressing at this point.
You do only have 3 points in between, so it is tight. So you do have to, like, we both are saying that Trump's going to win.
Yeah.
Quite comfortably, less than what, because going off a website called Project 530, and they've put Trump at 51% as of January the 14th.
Yeah.
So we believe he's going to do slightly worse than that.
Little bit.
But no, so I've put. So do you want to read out the numbers? Or?
Yeah. So I've got Trump at 48%. Sonny has him at 47%. Basically, that's a blowout. However you look at it. I have DeSantis in second at 18%, and Haley in third at 15%. You have Haley in second at 19% and DeSantis at 16%. My theory is, under your result, Sonny, DeSantis drops out. Under my result, he stumbles on and then drops out after New Hampshire or something.
Yeah.
Ramaswamy, you put him on 8, I put him on 9. My rationale was, I think he might perform a bit better than it appears on the surface, just because he's sort of got a lot of buzz, he has big crowds, and that doesn't normally matter in elections when people say, oh, they've got rallies. You know, Corbyn had lots of rallies, but when you're dealing with a caucus that's so participatory and you literally have to go to the room and gather together, I just think that energy will help a candidate like Ramaswamy. So how confident do you feel about your prediction, Sonny?
You know what?
Take me through your rationale. Sort of, I did my little spiel about Haley and Ramaswamy. Give me the case for the Sonny scenario.
Yeah, well, how I feel is that Ramaswamy politely is the least thing. I think Obama would have a better chance of becoming a Republican. These three, I'm obviously joking, but I think Ramaswamy isn't in this conversation at all. I think that Haley and...
What do you think? Do you think is it too young, or I mean, I don't think this is necessarily right, but I've seen some people say, I mean, the fact he's a Hindu might hurt him with sort of very evangelical Christian voters. What do you think disqualifies him?
Yeah, well, the US is very, very interesting religiously because it's technically non-religious, but it has an incredibly strong religious background. I think it's probably the most fervently Christian nation outside Brazil, maybe like Italy or Spain, and the Vatican City. And the Vatican City is literally just a church. Physically, that's what it is, and where the Pope lives. So I think that probably, really quite sadly, because I think it would be quite fascinating, not good or bad, but fascinating to see a Hindu as the leader of the Republican Party. I think that's damaged him. I think he's not particularly famous. You know, I'd heard of him, but that's all I'd had before these primaries had started. So yeah, I think Ramaswamy is completely out the race. I think Haley is the closest thing to splitting the Republican vote. I think DeSantis is just a worse copy of Trump. And considering how popular Trump is now, I don't see any reason. If you believe in what DeSantis has to say, you're probably just going to vote for Trump. Because even if there's some differences, Trump's the closest thing to you getting what you want. And I think Haley is maybe the closest thing to splitting that vote. So the reason I put Haley 3 points above what you put her it's because I think that if there's any Republicans that don't want Trump, they're not going to vote for DeSantis. They'll vote for Haley instead.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
Sorry, that was quite a long spiel, actually, but yeah.
No, it's good to inform our predictions. and we'll see what happens. I think it's very close, but I do think you could see some dropping out next week. And then New Hampshire, a week on Tuesday, Trump's only 10 points ahead of Haley. That's going to be very, very interesting, what happens in New Hampshire. We may even have a competitive election, Sonny. Wouldn't that be nice?
What a shock.
What a shock. All right. Sonny, thank you for joining me. Hopefully you'll be with us on our little extra pod. We're going to do a reaction to the caucuses after it's happened. But until then, thank you for listening to Political Paradigms. And Sonny, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I've absolutely loved it again.
And we will, of course, be back with our full service normal episode. Same time, same place, next week.